The thundering of hooves echoed across the plains as Fiona O'Malley ran barefoot through the tall grass, her tattered dress catching on brambles, her wrists still raw from the iron shackles that had bound her for 2 long years. Freedom was a taste so sweet it burned her lungs as she gasped for air, pushing her body beyond exhaustion, beyond pain, because behind her the sounds of pursuit grew ever closer. Texas, 1876. The unforgiving sun beat down on the parched earth as Fiona ducked into a shallow ravine, her heart pounding against her ribs. 23 years old, and she had already lived several lifetimes of suffering. Sold into servitude to pay her late father's gambling debts, she had been passed from one cruel master to another until she landed in the compound of Silas Thornton, a man whose cattle ranch was built on the broken backs of people he considered property. Fiona pressed her body against the cool earth, willing herself to become invisible as the riders passed overhead. She counted to 100 before daring to move again. Night would fall soon, and she needed shelter, water, anything to keep her alive until she could put enough distance between herself and Thornton's men. As darkness settled over the prairie, Fiona stumbled upon a small creek. She fell to her knees, cupping the cool water to her cracked lips, drinking until her stomach ached. The reflection that stared back at her was that of a stranger, hollowed cheeks, tangled copper hair, and eyes that had seen too much. She had escaped during the chaos of a stable fire, slipping away when the guards ran to control the blaze. It had been her only chance, and she took it without looking back. "Don't move," a deep voice commanded from behind her. Fiona froze, her blood turning to ice. Had they found her so quickly? Her eyes darted around, searching for a weapon, a route of escape, anything. "Turn around," slowly. She obeyed, rising to her feet with as much dignity as her trembling legs would allow. The man before her sat astride a chestnut stallion, his face shadowed by the brim of his hat. The silver star on his leather vest caught the moonlight. "Please," she whispered, her Irish accent thickening with fear. "I've done nothing wrong." The man dismounted, keeping his distance. As he stepped closer, Fiona could make out his features' strong jawline, weathered skin bronzed by the sun, and eyes that seemed to see right through her. He wasn't wearing Thornton's colors. "I'm Deputy Isaac Vaughn," he said, his voice softer now. "And judging by those marks on your wrists, you're running from something or someone." Fiona's hand instinctively moved to cover her raw skin. I can't go back." Isaac studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a worn blanket, offering it to her. "It gets cold out here at night." Fiona hesitated before taking it, wrapping it around her shoulders. The simple kindness nearly broke her. "There's a town about 5 miles west," Isaac continued. "Redemption. Small place, but decent folks for the most part. I've got a cabin on the outskirts. You can clean up there, get some proper food." "Why would you help me?" Fiona asked, suspicion edging her voice. In her experience, no one offered help without expecting something in return. Isaac's gaze drifted to the horizon. "Because nobody deserves to wear chains." He extended his hand toward her. "You're free now, let's keep it that way." Those words, "you're free now," echoed in Fiona's mind as she cautiously accepted his hand and allowed him to help her onto his horse. She sat behind him, keeping as much distance as the saddle would allow, her body tense and ready to flee at the first sign of betrayal. They rode in silence, the rhythm of the horses' hooves lulling Fiona into an exhausted daze. When they reached the small cabin nestled among a stand of cottonwood trees, she was barely conscious. Isaac's home was simple but clean, a far cry from the squalid quarters she had been forced to inhabit at Thornton's ranch. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, a rough-hewn table and chairs occupied the center, and a curtained alcove presumably hid his sleeping quarters. "You can wash up there," Isaac said, gesturing to a basin of water he had poured from a bucket. "I'll fix something to eat." Fiona approached the basin cautiously, dipping her hands into the cool water. The simple act of washing away the dirt and blood felt like a small miracle. She watched as Isaac moved efficiently around the small space, lighting a lamp, stoking the fire, pulling provisions from a cupboard. Thank you, she said softly, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. Isaac nodded without turning around. You're safe here, for tonight at least. The meal was simple beans, cornbread, and coffee, but to Fiona, it was a feast fit for royalty. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, afraid it might be taken away at any moment. How long were you there? Isaac asked finally, breaking the silence. Fiona set down her tin cup. 2 years at Thornton's, before that, other places, she swallowed hard. My father died owing money to powerful men. They took me as payment. Isaac's jaw tightened. Thornton, I know the name. He calls himself a cattle baron, but everyone knows his real business is in flesh. He'll be looking for me, Fiona said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Isaac agreed, his expression grim. But he won't be looking here, not right away. As night deepened, Isaac offered Fiona his bed while he took a blanket to the floor near the fire. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. Every creak of the cabin, every whisper of wind through the trees sent her heart racing. She lay rigid beneath the rough blanket, staring at the rafters, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake in trusting this stranger. When dawn broke, Fiona was surprised to find herself still alive, still free. The smell of coffee roused her fully, and she emerged from behind the curtain to find Isaac already dressed and cooking breakfast. There's clothes there, he said, nodding toward a bundle on the table. They belong to my sister. She's gone now, married a shopkeeper in Kansas City. They should fit you well enough. Fiona picked up the simple cotton dress, running her fingers over the fabric. It had been so long since she had worn anything but rags. I can't accept this. You can't keep wearing what you've got on, Isaac replied practically. And you'll draw less attention dressed properly. After changing, Fiona felt almost human again. The dress was a bit loose, but clean and whole. She had managed to tame her tangled hair into a semblance of order using a comb she found among the clothes. Isaac looked up when she rejoined him, his expression softening momentarily before he turned back to the stove. We need to talk about what happens next. I need to keep moving, Fiona said firmly. The further from Texas I get, the better. Isaac shook his head. That's what they'll expect. Every lawman from here to the territories will be looking for a woman traveling alone. He served her a plate of eggs and bacon. Thornton has friends in high places, official papers saying you're his property. I'm not property, Fiona said, her voice rising. I'm a person, a human being. I know that, Isaac replied, meeting her gaze steadily, but not everyone sees it that way, not when there's money involved. He sat down across from her. I've been tracking Thornton for months. There are rumors he's involved in more than just forced labor. Kidnapping, murder. But he's careful and he's protected. Fiona's appetite vanished. What are you suggesting? Stay in redemption. Hide in plain sight. I can find you work at the boarding house. Mrs. Henderson lost her help last month and she's desperate. You'd have a roof over your head, meals, and a small wage. And when Thornton's men come to town, by then we'll have a plan and evidence against him that will make those ownership papers worthless. Isaac's eyes held a determination that Fiona found both reassuring and frightening. But I need time. Fiona considered her options, which were painfully few. She had no money, no friends, nowhere to go, and Isaac had shown her nothing but kindness. All right, she agreed finally, but at the first sign of trouble I'm leaving. Fair enough, Isaac said with a nod. The town of Redemption was indeed small, a single dusty street lined with wooden buildings, a church with a crooked steeple, and scattered houses spreading outward like ripples on a pond. The boarding house sat at the far end of the main street, a 2-story structure with a wide porch and peeling paint. Mrs. Henderson was a widow in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She looked Fiona up and down with undisguised scrutiny. She's from back east, Isaac explained, sticking to the story they had concocted. My sister's friend looking for work while she gets her bearings. Can you cook? Mrs. Henderson asked bluntly. Yes, madam, Fiona replied, keeping her gaze steady despite her racing heart. Laundry, mending. Yes, madam. Well, I suppose I can give you a trial run. Room and board plus $2 a week. You'll share the attic room with Betsy, my kitchen girl. Mrs. Henderson turned to Isaac. You vouching for her, Deputy? Isaac nodded. She's good people, Mrs. Henderson. Fine, then. Florence, is it? Fiona, she corrected softly. Fiona, Mrs. Henderson repeated, testing the name. Unusual, come along then, plenty of work to be done before supper. Isaac caught Fiona's eye as she followed the older woman inside. I'll check in on you, he promised quietly. The work at the boarding house was hard but not unfamiliar. Fiona scrubbed floors, changed linens, hauled water, and helped in the kitchen from sunrise to well past sunset. But unlike her previous situation, here she was paid for her labor, given regular meals, and treated with a gruff sort of respect by Mrs. Henderson. Betsy, a cheerful girl of 19, welcomed her warmly, chattering about town gossip and the eligible bachelors of redemption while they worked. As days turned into weeks, Fiona gradually began to relax. The constant fear that had been her companion for so long slowly receded, though it never disappeared entirely. She developed a routine, found satisfaction in honest work, and even began to recognize familiar faces in town who nodded greetings as she passed. Isaac visited regularly, sometimes taking his meals at the boarding house, other times simply stopping by to inquire after her welfare. Their conversations were brief, mindful of curious eyes and wagging tongues, but Fiona found herself looking forward to his visits with an anticipation that both surprised and troubled her. One evening in late September, as Fiona was hanging laundry in the yard behind the boarding house, she became aware of someone watching her. She turned quickly, her heart in her throat, to find Isaac leaning against the fence. "You startled me," she admonished, pressing a hand to her chest. "Sorry," he said, though his smile suggested he wasn't entirely remorseful. "Just passing by and saw you out here." Fiona resumed her task, pinning a sheet to the line. "Mrs. Henderson says you haven't been taking your meals here lately." "Been busy," Isaac replied vaguely. He reached out to hand her a clothespin from the basket. Their fingers brushed, and Fiona felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. "I've been asking questions about Thornton," Isaac continued, his voice low, careful like. "Found out he's got a shipment of cattle coming through next week, and not just cattle," Fiona stilled. "People," Isaac nodded grimly. "That's the rumor. If I can catch him in the act, it could be enough to bring him down." "It's dangerous," Fiona said, unable to keep the concern from her voice. "Thornton doesn't act alone, I know, but it's a chance I have to take." Isaac's gaze softened as he looked at her. "How are you holding up, really?" Fiona considered the question. "I'm better. Mrs. Henderson works me hard, but she's fair, and no one's asked too many questions." "Good." Isaac hesitated, then added, "You look different, stronger." Fiona felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. It was true that the regular meals and rest had restored some of her health. Her hair had regained its luster, her face had filled out, and the constant terror had faded from her eyes. "I should go," Isaac said, glancing toward the street. "Just wanted to check in." "Thank you," Fiona said softly, "for everything." As Isaac walked away, Fiona found herself watching his retreating figure longer than was proper, a fluttering sensation in her stomach that she didn't dare name. That night, as she lay in her narrow bed listening to Betsy's soft snores, Fiona allowed herself to imagine a future one where she was truly free, where she might have a home of her own, perhaps even someone to share it with. It was a dangerous dream, but for the first time in years, it didn't seem entirely impossible. The following days passed in a blur of work and waiting. Fiona found herself watching the street for Isaac, but he didn't return to the boarding house. The knot of worry in her stomach grew with each passing day. It was nearly a week later when the news reached Redemption, a gunfight at Coyote Creek, just outside the county line. Deputy Vaughn had interrupted what appeared to be a slave transport disguised as a cattle drive. 2 of Thornton's men were dead, 1 wounded and in custody. But Thornton himself had escaped and Isaac had been shot. Fiona heard the news from 2 guests discussing it over breakfast. The plate she was carrying crashed to the floor, earning her a sharp rebuke from Mrs. Henderson. She cleaned up the mess mechanically, her mind racing. Was Isaac alive? Where had they taken him? It wasn't until that evening that she learned more. The wounded deputy had been brought to Doc Wilson's house on the edge of town. His condition was serious but stable. Without consciously deciding to do so, Fiona found herself slipping out of the boarding house after dark, making her way through the quiet streets to the doctor's modest home. She hesitated on the porch, then knocked softly. The door was opened by Mrs. Wilson, the doctor's wife, her face creased with fatigue. "Yes, I'm a friend of Deputy Vaughn's," Fiona stammered. "I heard he was injured." Mrs. Wilson studied her for a moment, then stepped aside. "He's resting, lost a lot of blood, but my husband got the bullet out clean." "You can see him for a few minutes." Fiona followed her to a small room at the back of the house. Isaac lay on a narrow bed, his face pale against the white pillowcase, a bandage visible beneath the blanket covering his chest. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. "Isaac," she whispered, moving to his side. His eyelids fluttered, then opened. For a moment, confusion clouded his gaze, then recognition dawned. "Fiona, you shouldn't be here. I had to come," she said, taking his hand in hers. It felt cool to the touch. "When I heard." "Thornton got away," Isaac said, his voice weak but edged with frustration. "But we got 3 of his men and freed 12 people, women and children, Fiona, bound for God knows where." "You did good," she assured him, squeezing his hand. "You'll get him next time." Isaac's expression darkened. "There might not be a next time. He knows I'm onto him now. He'll be more careful." Fiona felt a chill run through her, or more desperate. Isaac tried to sit up, wincing at the movement. "You need to be careful." "If he connects us, lie still," Fiona urged, gently pressing him back against the pillows. "You'll tear your stitches." Isaac settled back, his face contorted with pain. "Promise me you'll stay alert, don't go anywhere alone. And if anything seems wrong, anything at all, you come straight to the sheriff's office." "I promise," Fiona said, though fear had already begun to claw at her insides. "But you need to focus on healing." Mrs. Wilson appeared in the doorway. "That's enough for tonight. He needs rest." Fiona nodded, reluctantly releasing Isaac's hand. "I'll come back tomorrow." As she made her way back to the boarding house, Fiona couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The shadows between buildings seemed deeper, the night sounds more ominous. She quickened her pace, relief flooding through her when she reached the safety of the boarding house. But even as she climbed the stairs to her attic room, Fiona knew the relative peace she had found in redemption was shattered. Thornton was still out there, and now he had even more reason to hunt her down, not just as an escaped servant, but as a potential witness against him. Over the next few days, Fiona visited Isaac whenever she could slip away from her duties. His recovery was slow but steady, and with each visit, his color improved and his strength returned. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. Isaac told her about his childhood in Missouri, his decision to become a lawman after witnessing an injustice, his dream of someday settling down on a small ranch of his own. Fiona shared stories of Ireland, of her mother who had died when she was young, of her father who had loved her but whose weakness for gambling had led to her enslavement. In those quiet moments, sitting beside his sick, something shifted between them. The gratitude and cautious trust Fiona felt toward Isaac deepened into something more complex, more frightening in its intensity. And she could see in his eyes that he felt it too. "When I'm back on my feet," Isaac said one afternoon, his voice stronger now, "we need to think about getting you somewhere safer. Maybe Denver. I've got a friend there, a marshal. He could help you start fresh." The thought of leaving him sent a pang through Fiona's heart. "Is that what you want, for me to go?" Isaac's gaze met hers, held it. "What I want doesn't matter. What matters is keeping you safe." "It matters to me," Fiona said softly. Isaac reached for her hand, his touch sending warmth spreading through her. Fiona, a knock at the door interrupted whatever he had been about to say. Doc Wilson entered, his expression grave. "Deputy, there's someone here to see you, says it's urgent." The visitor was Sheriff Matthews from the neighboring county, a burly man with a thick mustache and worried eyes. He nodded curtly to Fiona before turning to Isaac. "Thornton's in the area," he said without preamble. "One of his men was caught trying to rob the stage about 10 miles east. Before he died, he said Thornton was looking for something he lost, something valuable." Fiona felt the blood drain from her face. Isaac's hand tightened around hers. "How many men with him?" Isaac asked. "At least 5, maybe more." Isaac exchanged a look with Fiona. "Sheriff, this is Fiona O'Malley. She's the something valuable Thornton is looking for." Sheriff Matthews studied Fiona with new interest. The Irish girl from the raid, one of his captives, yes, she escaped before the raid made her way here. The sheriff rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Well, that complicates things. Thornton's got a lot of friends, a lot of influence. And he's not above burning down a town to get what he wants. "I should leave," Fiona said, her voice trembling. "Draw him away from here." "No," Isaac said firmly. "That's exactly what he wants. You'd be alone out there, vulnerable." He turned to the sheriff. "We need to set a trap. Use Fiona as bait, but on our terms." "Isaac, no," Fiona protested. "It's the only way to end this," Isaac insisted. "As long as Thornton is free, you'll never be truly safe." The plan they devised was simple but risky. Word would be spread that a young woman matching Fiona's description had taken ill and was being cared for at a remote homestead outside of town. In reality, the homestead would be manned by lawmen from 3 counties, waiting to ambush Thornton and his gang when they arrived. Fiona would remain safely hidden in town, guarded by Sheriff Matthews' most trusted deputy. Isaac, still weak from his wound but adamant about participating, would join the ambush party. The night before the plan was to be set in motion, Fiona visited Isaac one last time at Doc Wilson's house. He was dressed now, sitting in a chair by the window, his gun belt laid out beside him. "You're not strong enough for this," Fiona said, unable to keep the fear from her voice. "Strong enough," Isaac replied, though the effort of sitting upright clearly cost him. "And I need to see this through." Fiona knelt beside his chair, taking his hands in hers. Why risk your life for me?" Isaac looked down at their joined hands, then met her gaze steadily. "Because from the moment I found you by that creek, something changed in me. I've spent my life upholding the law, believing in justice. But seeing what was done to you, knowing that men like Thornton prosper while good people suffer." He paused, his expression softening. "And because somewhere along the way I fell in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Fiona felt tears spring to her eyes, her heart too full for speech. "I know it's not proper," Isaac continued quietly. "I know I'm not offering much. A deputy's pay doesn't go far, and you deserve so much more after everything you've endured. But when this is over, if we both come through it, I'd like the chance to court you properly, to see if maybe you might someday feel for me what I feel for you." Fiona raised her hand to his cheek, feeling the warmth of his skin, the slight roughness of stubble. "Isaac Vaughn," she said softly, her Irish lilt more pronounced with emotion, "I already do." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a promise rather than a passion. When they parted, Isaac rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm on her face. "Come back to me," Fiona whispered. "I will," Isaac promised, "and then we'll start our life together. No more chains, no more running." The next 24 hours were the longest of Fiona's life. She was sequestered in the sheriff's office, a small room with barred windows and the constant presence of Deputy Miller, a taciturn man who barely spoke but whose vigilance never wavered. Every sound from outside made her jump. Every passing hour increased her anxiety for Isaac's safety. It was well past midnight when the door finally opened. Sheriff Matthews entered, his expression grim, his clothes dusty and stained. Fiona rose to her feet, her heart in her throat. "Isaac," the sheriff removed his hat. "It's over. Thornton and 3 of his men are dead, 2 others in custody." "And Isaac?" Fiona pressed, her voice barely above a whisper. A shadow moved in the doorway, and then Isaac was there, leaning heavily on a crutch, a fresh bandage visible on his thigh, but alive. Gloriously, wonderfully alive. Fiona flew to him, mindful of his injuries, but unable to restrain herself completely as she embraced him. Isaac's free arm wrapped around her, holding her close as if he never intended to let her go. "You're hurt again," she murmured against his chest. "Just a graze," Isaac assured her. "Doc Wilson's already seen to it, said I'm too stubborn to die." Sheriff Matthews cleared his throat. "I'll give you folks a moment," he said, retreating to the outer office with Deputy Miller in tow. Alone, Fiona and Isaac simply held each other, the reality of their survival slowly sinking in. It was Isaac who finally broke the silence. "It really is over, Fiona. Thornton can't hurt you anymore." The evidence we found at his camp ledgers, receipts, witness statements from the people we freed, it's all being sent to the federal marshals. Any claim he had on you died with him. Fiona pulled back slightly to look into his face. "What does that mean for me?" Isaac smiled, the weariness in his eyes giving way to something warmer. "It means you're free, truly free in the eyes of the law as well as in fact. You can go wherever you want, do whatever you choose." "And if what I choose is to stay right here," Fiona asked, "with you?" Isaac's smile deepened. "Then I'd say I'm the luckiest man in the territory." He shifted his weight, wincing slightly at the movement. "Though I should warn you, courting a wounded lawman might not be the easiest path." Fiona laughed, a sound of pure joy that surprised even her. "Isaac Vaughn, after everything I've survived, I think I can handle a man with a limp and a tendency to get shot." Spring came to redemption, bringing with it new life and new beginnings. The wild roses that grew along the creek were in full bloom, their sweet scent carried on the warm breeze as Fiona walked arm in arm with Isaac down the church steps. Behind them, the townsfolk who had gathered for the simple ceremony threw rice and called out good wishes. Fiona's wedding dress, a gift from Mrs. Henderson, who had surprised everyone with her sentimentality, was simple but elegant, the soft blue fabric complementing her auburn hair, which was adorned with a crown of the wild roses. Isaac, finally fully recovered from his wounds, stood tall and proud in a new suit, his deputy's badge polished to a shine. They had chosen to build their life in redemption, where both had found a measure of redemption themselves. Isaac continued his work as a deputy, though with a greater focus on bringing justice to those who exploited others. Fiona had taken a position teaching at the small schoolhouse, discovering a talent and passion for education that surprised her. Their home was a modest cabin on the edge of town, expanded and improved by Isaac's own hands. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs, a haven built on mutual respect, shared dreams, and a love that had been forged in the crucible of danger and desperation. As they made their way to the waiting buggy that would take them to a small hotel in the next town for their honeymoon, Isaac paused, drawing Fiona close. "Happy?" he asked softly. Fiona looked up at him, at this man who had seen beyond her chains to the woman beneath, who had offered her freedom when she had known nothing but captivity, who had risked his life to ensure that freedom could never be taken from her again. "More than I ever dreamed possible," she replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. As they drove away, the setting sun painting the prairie in shades of gold and crimson, Fiona remembered that night by the creek when a stranger's voice had commanded her not to move. She had been certain then that her brief taste of freedom was over, that she would be returned to bondage or worse. Instead, those moments had been the beginning of her true liberation, not just from physical chains, but from the fear and hopelessness that had bound her spirit. Isaac had given her the greatest gift of all when he had said those simple words, "You're free now." And in loving him, in building a life with him, she had discovered that freedom was not just the absence of chains, but the presence of choice, of purpose, of love. As the town of Redemption receded behind them and the open prairie stretched before them, Fiona leaned her head against Isaac's shoulder, content in the knowledge that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, two people who had found in each other the courage to believe in second chances and the strength to embrace them.